Hey guys, Drifter here. Welcome to Black Ops Cold War in Depth. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about why the AUG is kind of OP2. We reviewed the M16 in the last episode, and the AUG and the M16 are two of the best weapons in Black Ops Cold War. They are statistically very similar, so some of this is going to be a repeat from last episode. However, the AUG does differ from the M16 in some key ways, so do pay attention because that could make the difference between you winning and losing a gunfight. But overall, the AUG is an incredibly strong weapon that I think is probably in need of a little nerfing. One of the best things about the AUG is that the default iron sights are a scope, just kind of like the real life AUG A3. It has a factory scope just default built into the weapon, so instead of having to use iron sights, you get a free attachment with this weapon, and I think that is a fantastic benefit. Another passive benefit that the weapon has that's kind of underrated by a lot of players is that the AUG bullet velocity is 775 meters per second, which is the fastest bullet velocity in the entire game. That's faster than the M16, that's faster than the LMGs, that's faster than a lot of the base sniper rifles that don't have any sort of barrel modifications, faster than any assault rifle. This is incredibly fast bullet velocity. The bullet velocity problem is very noticeable on SMGs and sometimes assault rifles depending on how you kit them. It can make a very, very big difference in your gunfights, so having the highest bullet velocity is just downright awesome. And in my opinion, a velocity boosting barrel won't be helpful unless maybe you're playing Dirty Bomb or you're in Warzone and you need to do some extreme range shots. But outside of that, just the default velocity is pretty amazing. The damage is also pretty amazing. It'll kill in either 3 or 4 shots depending on how far away you are from the enemy, dealing 54 damage up close and then decreasing down to 38 damage at fairly long ranges. So its initial damage is a little bit higher than the M16 and its long range damage is a little bit less than the M16, but it doesn't really matter because your shots to kill are going to be the same. And just like the M16, headshots will grant 1 less shot to kill at all ranges. So headshots probably aren't worth it unless enemies are pretty far away, and then if you can land a long-range headshot, it can be worth it, though that's difficult on a burst weapon. Speaking of ranges, the maximum damage range is 30 meters, which is longer than the M16. The M16 is 21, this one's like 30.5. It's not quite as long as assault rifles. Most of the assault rifles are 40 to 50 meters for their maximum damage range, but again, this is more than the M16 and more than most of your engagements are going to be in Black Ops Cold War. In my opinion, the AUG is best used when one bursting people, and if they're really far away, you shouldn't need more than 2 bursts. If you're needing 3 or 4 bursts to kill an enemy, you're either playing Fireteam Dirty Bomb or you're just using this weapon wrong. It does differ from the M16 in its rate of fire, which are going to give us different time to kill numbers. The AUG burst rate of fire, or how fast it fires in the burst, is 860 rounds per minute, which is a little bit slower than the 900 RPM that the M16 has. Not tremendously, and you probably wouldn't really notice this. The AUG burst delay is 200 milliseconds, which is about a frame and a half, maybe 2 frames faster than the M16's burst delay. So the speed of the burst of the AUG is slightly slower than the M16, but the burst delay is faster, making it simultaneously both slower and faster. As you'll see when we get to the time to kill numbers, you kind of get some goofy results. Some barrels will supposedly boost the rate of fire, as you can see in the stats, and what this boost, I'm saying the word boost way too many times, what this improves is the rate of fire of the burst, but it doesn't really affect the burst delay in any way, so you just start spamming out faster. Unlike the M16, I'd never do it, but for the AUG, I do think it's reasonable to increase your burst speed in order to compete with M16 users if you have to. It wouldn't be my go-to strategy, but it's not an unreasonable one. When it comes to time to kill, the AUG will 1 burst kill in 154 milliseconds, which is very slightly slower than the M16, a frame, maybe a frame and a change, depending on what kind of frame rate you're running on the new consoles, but that's still incredibly fast. That's the second fastest in the game. And the 2 burst time to kill is a little bit faster than the M16 by about a frame because the burst delay is a little bit faster. So it's a little bit slower in point blank, a little bit faster at long range, but we're talking a frame on either side, so you probably wouldn't notice. The AUG is the second fastest killing gun in the game, and that is a very close second. It's only a frame or 2 difference, and only the most elite pro-level CSGO, only play at 300 FPS gods could even theoretically notice this. For most of you guys, it's going to be so close it's going to feel identical to the M16. Instead of a sponsor today, I'm going to give myself a little shout out. I'm streaming Black Ops Cold War and hosting a movie night tonight on twitch.tv/drifter. That's the first link down there in the description. I should be streaming about 2 to 3 hours after this video goes live and trying to maintain it for most of the night. So for most of you, you should be able to click and see me live right now. I'm going to be playing Black Ops Cold War, and then we're going to be watching Johnny Mnemonic in order to prepare for the Cyberpunk launch. Back to the AUG. The AUG is just an extremely fast-killing weapon in general, and that's not only for Black Ops Cold War, but for any Call of Duty game. This gun absolutely shreds people, and it is an incredibly dangerous weapon. It would be wise to take AUG users seriously, or you're going to get deleted. Now, we're going to have to talk about a few of the things that the AUG does not do particularly well, and one of them is its handling stats. It has an aim down sights time of 350 milliseconds, which is slower than assault rifles and getting kind of closer to LMG territory, but the sprint out time is significantly slower than the M16 at 333 milliseconds. This one got nerfed recently, so you can't sprint out quite as quickly and use it as a shotgun, so it's kind of slow. The handling stats on this weapon aren't particularly impressive. Unlike the M16, you're going to need to sit back and play slow with it. It has a slower than average reload time at 2.7 seconds, and like the M16, it has a wider than average hipfire by about 1 milliradian, and that's compared to assault rifles, but a lot of the attachments we're going to stack on it also hurt the hipfire, so the AUG isn't quite the shotgun close-range burst machine that the M16 is. The recoil on this weapon is a little bit hard to describe via text, so let's compare it to the M16. I thought this airplane wing here in Checkmate would be a good place to test. This is the basic M16 with no attachments, and this is the basic AUG with no attachments. Again, the scope is default. When you take a look at the two recoil patterns side by side, they're similar yet different. The M16 is fairly tight, almost all vertical recoil. The AUG has a very tight cluster, but a few anomalous shots that kick really far out, and it seems to have more side-to-side wobble than vertical. Depending on how you want to measure it, that's probably a bit less accurate than the M16, but still similar. The M16, again, is going to kick up, but not a lot of horizontal recoil. The AUG does have horizontal wobble, but it's not as vertical, yet it also just has some anomaly kind of shots that kick wildly to the side for reasons that I can't quite understand. So I'm going to say that the AUG is a little bit less accurate than the M16, and the recoil improving attachments are going to be very important. On top of this, much like the M16, the AUG is going to be easier to use on console than PC because of the strong aim assist. When you're playing on console, the aim assist should help you track people very accurately throughout the burst, whereas on PC, you're going to have to do this yourself. Now, PC hitboxes are somewhat awkward. You don't have any sort of auto aim or aim assist, and it's something that I'm not very good at, so I had to practice that to get good, and I believe that you also may have to practice with the AUG for a few games to kind of get the hang of it. There's a little trick to it. It's not super hard. It's not the hardest thing to master, but it's not right out of the box easy. It takes a little bit of effort. This is usually the part of the episode where I'm reviewing iron sights, but lol, nope, not today. The gun comes with a free scope attachment, which is just awesome in my opinion. If you're not running Gunfighter, if you're just running one of the basic builds with 5 attachments, you're really getting 6 since your scope is free. At the end of the day, the AUG tactical rifle is basically like the M16's big brother. The M16's a little faster, a little snappier, but the AUG hits harder. It's a tiny bit slower than the M16, and a smidge less accurate, but it has a lot more range on the one burst kills, especially when you put certain barrels on it. So if you want a long range burst rifle, this one will absolutely outperform the M16, and it's not terrible up close either. Like the M16, I can use the AUG as a primary assault rifle with the right kitting. I can use it as an SMG rusher deleter as long as I'm aiming down sights before they're coming. I can hipfire shotgun with it, not as good as the M16, but it can be done. I can snipe and I can counter snipe. This is an extremely versatile weapon, and it's going to matter how you kit it out, but you can do almost anything with it, and even with the wrong kitting, you can make it work in situations where it probably shouldn't, and because of that, I think the weapon's kind of overpowered. The AUG's only true weakness is that the sprint out time is very slow now, perhaps unnecessarily slow because that didn't really change the strengths of the gun in any capacity. So no, you can't like rush and sprint with it a whole lot, but it's still a very strong weapon that you can use almost anywhere, anytime. And I have 2 classes that should be versatile enough to get you that kind of anywhere, anytime performance. Class number 1 is my rushing class. On this one, we don't need any optics because we've got the nice default scope. I run the infantry compensator because it gives me a tremendous amount of vertical recoil control. Even though we have some horizontal recoil control penalty, we're going to fix that right up. I run the ember sighting point attachment for the body. This is one that I fell in love with the AUG, especially when I was going for long range kills. The reveal distance, the little red dots, seeing people through the bushes just really mattered more on this weapon than the M16 for me, and it gives me better hipfire accuracy, though I do have to take some ADS and sprint out penalties. After that, I run the Field Agent Grip, which gives me more vertical recoil control, but a colossal amount of horizontal recoil control so that it cancels out my earlier penalties. Then I'm going to run the simple jungle style mags for really quick reloads with no more ADS penalties, and the Serpent Wrap so that I can take in a little ADS time boost. I lose a little bit more sprint to fire time, but not quite as much if I went for the Airborne Elastic. So this one, I can't quite sprint to hip fire, but I can ADS really well, and I've got a really tight burst for up close and fast reloading, and it works really well as a close quarters combat class, as you've seen from a lot of the gameplay. However, the class that I think is really probably best on this weapon, how it's meant to be used, is the long-range actual tactical rifle class. This one we're going to use Gunfighter for, and we are going to use the SUSAT multi-zoom optics on it. This is the same one that I like for the M16. It's just very clear, easy to use sights with 2 levels of zoom that's easy to control. I love it. You're going to run the infantry compensator again for the same reason of vertical recoil control. We're going to be able to put a barrel on it this time, so we're going to put on the match grade barrel, which doubles our one burst range all the way out to about 60 meters or so, which is kind of insane in this game. Very powerful, very important attachment. Still going to be using the Ember sighting point. This one is much more important on this version of the AUG than the other because it allows me to see little red dots through smoke and heads and little areas when you're looking at people through clutter. The visibility is low in this game, so sometimes it's difficult to spot people, but when I'm looking at them with the Ember sighting point, it usually lets me know if it's a bad guy or not, and since the weapon has good bullet penetration, I can just punch them through walls, which is great. Field Agent foregrip again for the same reasons. Little vertical recoil control takes care of my horizontal penalties. I run the Stanag 54 round drum magazine, even with the ADS time penalty, just so that I can continually spam and punish people at long ranges and I don't have to reload very often. And then finally for this one, we're going to be using the Airborne Elastic Wrap, and I'm going to take the additional penalties, but it makes my ADS time much faster, which is important for snap aiming. I have flinch resistance, so I won't miss, and I can get in and out of various stances, which is very important. And this one really is the long-range, camping, warzone, dirty bomb, combined arms, hold it down, go for a streak kind of class. You don't want to be super mobile with it. You don't want to rush people with it. You kind of can. It's just not the best strategy. You really just want to stay back and punish people at long ranges. Well, guys, that's all for this episode of Black Ops Cold War in Depth. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you learned something useful about the AUG. If you did, you could like, favorite, or subscribe, or you could come hang out on Twitch tonight, watch me play some Cold War, and we'll watch a movie together. Drifter out.